level set because we have listeners coming in from all different backgrounds. And
Sure.
while we all use energy, I think the concept of the traditional grid is not one that everybody understands. Could you maybe first walk us through that traditional grid, and then I'll pull you over and you can explain the difference between the traditional grid and a microgrid?
Oh, 50,000 foot view. I don't want to get too in depth.
Please, please, yes.
Essentially, on the major grid, you can look at it as generation, transmission, distribution, consumption. We'll look at it at those four parts, right? So generation, traditionally, you're looking at these large power plants that boil water to produce steam to turn a generator. Now, there are several different ways they can use to heat up that water. I mean, a lot of times they use coal as a mixture to, get the water to steam temperature. Sometimes they use nuclear power. Sometimes they use natural gas, but in a lot of places they use coal to do that. Now, when they use that coal to heat up the water to turn the generator, that power gets transmitted over long distances because you usually have a 500-600 mile radius sometimes that each one of these power plants can cover, and that gets transmitted to an area, maybe 300-400 miles of transmission lines, and then that because it's easier to transmit power at a high frequency or at a high level. Then they step that down and distribute it to an area. That's where you see your substations, all the houses and businesses or whatever, they're connected to a substation in an area, and then from that area you use that to consume your power coming from that. So that's essentially like the national grid. So they generate the
One. Okay.
power, transmit the power at long distances to the substation that distributed powers to the individual houses or businesses or whatever. And those individual houses or whatever, they see the meter, they connect to a meter, and that's how you are charged for the usage of that power. A
Got it.
microgrid is effectively the same thing, but on a much, much smaller scale, right? You have generation assets like solar panels, they generate power. You can have hydrogen fuel cells. You can have things like storage, like battery systems that can store power and still be considered as an asset, sort of like generation, because you're being able to draw power from it. And that power is distributed and transmitted and distributed over a much smaller distance. Instead of hundreds of miles, it's hundreds of inches or a few feet. Most of the time that power is what's called DC, direct current. And your appliances, in your house, that's like the, distribution system, use AC. So they convert that power, convert it from DC to AC, and then you use it locally. You consume it locally, just like you would in a microgrid. So that's why they call it a microgrid, because it's a much smaller version of the larger grid where you have generation, transmission, distribution, and consumption. You have that hyper local of generation, transmission, and consumption.
Very digestible. Thank you for breaking it
I'm
down that
sorry.
way.
That was probably about as easy as I could make it.
That I got it. I got it. It was perfect. So you're the co-founder and CEO of a company called Brevian Energy.
That is
Would you
correct.
mind explaining the business model? And so this is a microgrid solutions provider,
Essentially,
correct?
like we just said, what a microgrid is. And we like to say, if you've seen one microgrid, you've seen one microgrid, right? Because everyone is
Oh,
totally different.
huh.
So that's where we come in and we analyze. If you are an existing location, we can analyze your usage that, over usually at least a 1 year to 2 year time frame to understand the cyclical nature of your usage, so we can make sure we design a system that can meet your needs during your peak times.
Okay.
So we perform that analysis, and then we come in with most of the time we use solar. That is a real large component of what we do. Solar panels. We come in with battery systems that and the type of battery systems that can take your whole load and can shift the load on a daily basis instead of just being a backup system that only can take your load when the grid is not available. Well, a lot of people don't realize there is what's called a demand charge, number one, on your bill. So you get charged for the energy that you use, that's your consumption,
Hmm.
but that's the consumption charge, your per kilowatt hour charge. And you also get charged for the amount of power that's made available for you to consume, right, at your peak. And that's measured in 15-minute intervals. So that's why they call your interval information. So your highest peak usage or your highest 15 minutes of usage in a given month is what you're charged for as a demand charge. And that's could be as much as a third of your bill, depending on
Really? Hmm.
how much that's made available to you for you to use. So a lot of people really don't understand that. And here in we're in San Diego, California, and I wouldn't even say the name of our utility company here, but we have the highest utility rates in all of the United States of America.
Wow.
And we have what's called time of use, where we are charged 3 different rates depending on the time that you use it. Right. So there's a rate from 7 a.m. to 3:59 p.m. That's called off peak.
Okay.
Then there's a rate for 4 p.m. to 8:59 p.m. That is called peak. And in some cases, we've seen that can go to as much as 74-75 cents per kilowatt hour.
Wow.
Right. And that's a lot.
Hmm.
And then after that, that 9 a.m. to 6:59, that is the super off peak, which is obviously the much cheaper. That's when people are encouraged to charge their cars and things like that.
Mm.
Certainly not at that 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock time frame, because that
Yeah.
is the most expensive. And that's that's the time when everybody's home, everybody's washing dishes and cooking and watching television, and so that peak time really is getting to us. But we have the ability with the microgrid, when you're producing your own energy, and we have the battery systems and the control systems that come with them to shift your load at 3:59 if your solar panels aren't really producing, particularly in the evenings, in the winter time when the sun goes down relatively early. These time frames, your power is kicking, your solar kicking in almost to 8 o'clock at night. But
Mm.
in other time periods when that is not the case, we have the ability to shift the load to the battery system. So now you don't have to draw from the grid during those peak usage times. So you don't have to do that at all. And if it's not grid attached, you don't have to worry about that anyway.
And does Brevian partner with manufacturers, or you work with whoever is looking to put in the microgrid and they select, for example, what renewable energy source and what energy storage
No,
solution they want to have?
we partner with we have a solar panel company that we work with for all of our projects. We've toured their facility, and we've met with the founders and owners. So we have a great relationship with them. We have a battery manufacturer that we've partnered with, and our control systems partner that we partner with. A hydrogen fuel cell company that we partnered with, a wind turbine company that we partnered with to bring in these technologies. And again, like I said, that mixture of technologies is totally different depending on the requirements and the needs of each customer. Some customers may be more mission critical than others. Some customers may be more cyclical in nature, like a school. In the summertime, there's very little usage at some of them. Some of them may have summer school, but some of them may not. So it really kind of depends. Some have requirements to operate 24/7. They're a manufacturing company, so it really kind of really depends on the usage and the nature of each particular individual customer would depend on that mixture of technologies they would need to sustain them.